um, who will be part of our audience. We welcome Miss Gail, who's live from Houston, Texas. Miss Gail was one of our facilitators at our first forum on Friday. So we welcome Ms. Gail again to this forum. We have Justin as well, who is present. I don't recognize two others, but I know Jackie is here, Alexis is here, um, and other guests. So welcome all of you. We're waiting on Mr. Giovanni, who will be one of our facilitators. And today we have the pleasure of um, uh, discussing a very important theme, and that's the labor unions and the current situation in Belize. This is very timely because if I'm not mistaken, if it's not this month or next month, we will be celebrating the 130th anniversary of the encyclical Rerum Novarum, eh, written by Pope Leo the 23rd, Rerum Novarum, and this encyclical, which kind of inaugurates the whole social teachings of the Catholic Church, inspired the nationalist movement in 1949, 1950, to champion the cause of the Belizeans back in the 20th century. So Rerum Novarum is on the new order of things for the workers. So it was the first time that uh, the Catholic Church was coming to the forefront advocating for the working conditions, which were very detrimental in an era of the Industrial Revolution, back in the 1800s, the late 1800s, right? So we are celebrating the milestone. So today's forum aims at two things. One, at remembering the story back throughout the 1900s with the laborers' protests um, in the world wars, which were more of a social centered cause with the volunteers who went to the wars and then they came back protesting about the mistreatment, the ill treatment to the people in the colonies, how they were treated in Europe. More of that is present in the soberanist movement, the cause of the workers, the social, economic aspect as lived by Belize after the Great Depression, after the pandemic of 1913, after the hurricane of 1931, and after the devaluation. So all of this comes to light in the 30s, 40s, with the plight of the Belizean laborer, unemployment, underemployment. and the whole cause and the reason of the Soberanistas movement. So one, we are remembering that story, that narrative, and secondly, we see how that is a springboard for the nationalist movement, which is born from the workers' union and finds its fulfillment, so to speak, in the fight for independence in 1981, and that is one of the fruits of that movement. And then we also remember the narrative to apply to what is happening today. So although the document Rerum Novarum 130 years ago brings to light the ill conditions, the ill treatment of laborers, and then we see how that document is used to promote the well-being of the Belizean laborers with the birth of the nationalist movement, we also bring that to actuality and see how the, the conditions of our laborers 130 years later in 2021, how that is similar and how that has changed. And using the current issues, the current situation of the public servants, the teachers, the police, the nurses, and the whole the austerity measures that the Prime Minister and the government of Mr. John Briceño has put forth, and the the issues that the the unions are championing for, apart from the 10% cut. So those are the two things that we are bringing to light here. Remembering the narrative and actualizing it. How does that find make sense in today's status, social, economic conditions of the workers? So we welcome Mr. Giovanni. Mr. Giovanni Pinello is with us now. So we begin celebrating our story with inviting Justin to present us a segment, Justin, just a segment of our theme song.
Yes, sir.
Tu sangre viene de lejos para juntarse a la sangre mía. Y al golpe de los tambores se hizo más fuerte nuestra consigna. Yada fui feliz, yada fui feliz, yada fui feliz, feliz se vencerá. Yada fui feliz, yada fui feliz, yada fui feliz, feliz se vencerá. Otra. Yada fui feliz, yada fui feliz, yada fui feliz, feliz se vencerá. Otra. Yada fui feliz, yada fui feliz, yada fui feliz, feliz se vencerá. Tu sangre viene de lejos para juntarse a la sangre mía. Tu sangre viene de lejos para juntarse a la sangre mía. El golpe de los tambores se hizo más fuerte nuestra consigna. El golpe de los tambores se hizo más fuerte nuestra consigna. Ya la fui feliz, ya la fui feliz.
Thank you, Justin. Yada for we Belize. Belize is for us. Belize is for us. Let us pray in the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Father in heaven, we thank you for the gift of Belize, for the gift of homeland, for the gift of having a nation, for the gift of citizenship, for the gift of being able to build identity, for that responsibility that you've given us. Help us to live up to those duties that we're called to build our homeland and to make it a better place, that we are building upon the contributions of the Mayas. We are building upon the work of the Baymen. We are building upon enslaved Africans who left their home to come to a foreign place. We are building upon the contributions of so many people, so many groups that came to make Belize their homeland. Ikaichemaya, Mestizo, Lebanese, Garifuna, Quechimaya, East Indians, Chinese, expatriates, Mennonites, and so many others who have made this nation their home. Help us to build upon that so that when it's our turn to leave, to, to, to step aside, we may have empowered the younger ones to take over and to continue the job, the task, the responsibility of building our home and making it a better place. We ask, oh Father, that you may enlighten our young people, untie their tongues tonight so that the Holy Spirit may move their intellects to make positive contributions and stand up for what is good and what is right for Belize. We pray for Mr. Giovanni, Justin, for myself, that we may also be directed to assess this exercise in a fair manner. Bless our institution, bless our families, our friends, our benefactors, our teachers. Bless our leaders in government and in civil society. In the name of Jesus, we pray, amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Yes, so welcome again. Welcome again to everybody. It's nice to see your beautiful and handsome looks. And to all our visitors, I've named all of you who may have joined earlier or later. Welcome all of you. And we trust this is going to be as edifying as our first forum. So you know the proceedings. You know the proceedings. Let me share my screen. Okay, it's more or less 60 minutes. We might go, likely will go overboard as usual. But you know, Mr. Giovanni, you studied the rubrics. This group, all three groups here are doing option A, B, which is the which is the labor movement. So option B. So we're not grading option A, it's option B. So it's a total of 8 times 3, 24 points, not 39.
Mister,
24 points.
we're
Yes?
doing option A.
Oh, sorry. So option A is the labor movement, right?
Yes.
Yes. So sorry, it's option A. So I've done the introduction. After this, we'll have the reflective piece, which is a recording done by the 3 groups. So it's 2 recordings per group. The first recording is in the person of the Prime Minister calling on workers to take a 10% cut and make that sacrifice for Belize, given the economic gloom we are facing. The second recording will be in the person of a union leader um, calling on the government to find other ways and not taking, rebutting the 10% a cut and presenting other issues that the unions are calling for, are fighting for today. So it's kind of a persuasive 2-3 minutes recording. So that will be presented by group 1, then group 2, then group 3. After that, we are going to invite the facilitators, and that includes Mr. Giovanni, myself, and Justin, if he so desires, to begin the conversation. To begin the conversation based on what you presented and on any of the documents that you dealt with in class, which is Antonio Soberanes and the disturbances in Belize 1934 and 1937.
Mister, I think you're reading the options for option B. For option B, it stated it was a video recording, and then for option A, it said nothing whatsoever for video.
It's this. No? A video recording the Prime Minister and the union leader. So that's what you're doing tonight. And then we will begin these questions are some for you to have considered, and I will use my question from these, and Mr. Giovanni can use one of these, or just pick it up from the discussion. So any questions before we begin? Okay, if not, we start with volunteers. Who's okay, the Siani. Okay, we begin with the Sianis group. So you are allowed now to share.
So today my partner, Disiani Gonzalez, and I, Indra Guerra, will be presenting and sharing our video to you that is based on option B. So Disiani will be sharing the video so you can see it.
Indra, lo puedes hacer share tú porque no me da el option.
Okay, right now. Can you see my screen?
We see your screen.
Okay.
As the Prime Minister, I urge the teacher union to bear with me, to cope with me. Our country is in a financial crisis at the moment. In order for our country to come back to normal financially, we have to do some cuts. We are in a crisis with 30% unemployed and 38% underemployed. There are many people who are suffering. And we as a country have to think on what will benefit us as a nation to help the poor. Therefore, it is necessary for this salary cut to occur. So then we could use this money for something that will be beneficial to the country.
I, on behalf of the union, urge you, Prime Minister, to bear with us. We are in the middle of a pandemic. We as well need our money. We, the teachers, are a major factor that without us, this country would not run as it runs today. We as the educators to brave young minds to become what they want or dream to become. The work of a teacher is not so simple as it requires hard work and dedication. Teachers are the ones who educate the students who are the future of the generation. Because of us, the teachers, the country has firefighters, doctors, ministers, police officers, nurses, and so on. So how can 10% cut be fair for us when we sacrifice a lot for the country? We have expenses as well, as we already pay GST taxes when going to the grocery store. We also pay social security. We pay for our classes to look presentable for our students when teaching. We spend in all kinds of expenses for our classes. So how fair is it to have a 10% cut that we work so hard for?
I understand you teachers, but you have to cope with us as well. The country cannot continue borrowing millions of dollars. The country owes billions of dollars. The country needs to stand our ground to pay this debt so that our economy becomes stable, so that we can provide jobs to those who are staying without one. The cause of inflation happening can cause major damage if we do not stop paying large amount of money to teachers, police officers, doctors, and even us, the ministers. We cannot continue borrowing money and printing money. We can cause a hyperinflation, causing the devaluation of the Belizean money. We are trying to prevent that from happening. We, as the Belizeans that we are, should start coping with what is truly happening in our country. All I ask is for you, the union, and the public service to help us. Once we are stable, then we can raise salaries to the teachers and to the rest of the nation. All I ask is for you to help us. We have no other choice than to do this for the meantime.
Yes, Prime Minister. When starting with a salary cut, you should have started with the large amounts, which were with the ministers that practically win more than the teachers, doctors, and the list goes on. Salary cuts should have started with the billions of dollars that the ministers did and continue to do so. Salary cuts should have started by putting the responsible ones who put us in this mess. Let's start from the root of our nation's crisis. When Mr. Musa started giving billions of dollars, continuing with Mr. Barrow, who did the same thing.
Excuse me, could you please
People
stop
are
the
here
video?
suffering.
I'll present it and everyone's having trouble seeing the
About
video.
the crisis to our country. So, Prime
Right
Minister,
now,
let's start by holding them accountable for all these debts that now we Belizeans are paying the consequences for. Why are they not
I
taken
think
to
my
court?
computer
As we all see news
froze
from
right now.
Guatemala and the other countries in which they held any corrupt ministers responsible for any crisis that they cause to the nation. Why can't police hold the prime ministers as
So do I send you the video, Justin?
Ya se lo mandé yo.
Desiani sent me the video. I'm downloading it right now. Give me a second and I'll play it. Can you guys see the video?
Yes.
All right, cool.
Prime Minister, I urge the teacher union to bear with me, to cope with me. Our country is in a financial crisis at the moment. In order for our country to come back to normal financially, we have to do some cuts. We are in a crisis with 30% unemployed and 38% underemployed. There are many people who are suffering. And we as a country have to think on what will benefit us as a nation to help the poor. Therefore, it is necessary for this salary cut to occur, so then we could use this money for something that will be beneficial to the country.
I, on behalf of the union, urge you, Prime Minister, to bear with us. We are in the middle of a pandemic. We as well need our money. We, the teachers, are a major factor that without us, this country would not run as it runs today. We as the educators prepare young minds to become what they want or dream to become. The work of a teacher is not so simple as it requires hard work and dedication. Teachers are the ones who educate the students who are the future of the generation. Because of us, the teachers, the country has firefighters, doctors, ministers, police officers, nurses, and so on. So how can 10% cut be fair for us when we sacrifice a lot for the country? We have expenses as well, as we already pay GST taxes when going to the grocery store. We also pay Social Security. We pay for our classes to look presentable for our students when teaching. We spend in all kinds of expenses for our classes. So how fair is it to have a 10% cut that we work so hard for?
I understand you teachers, but you have to cope with us as well. The country cannot continue borrowing millions of dollars. The country owes billions of dollars. The country needs to stand our ground to pay this debt so that our economy becomes stable, so that we can provide jobs to those who are staying without one. The cause of inflation happening can cause major damage if we do not stop paying large amount of money to teachers, police officers, doctors, and even us, the ministers. We cannot continue borrowing money and printing money. We can cause a hyperinflation, causing the devaluation of the Belizean money. We are trying to prevent that from happening. We, as the Belizeans that we are, should start coping with what is truly happening in our country. All I ask is for you, the union, and the public service to help us. Once we are stable, then we can raise salaries to the teachers and to the rest of the nation. All I ask is for you to help us. We have no other choice than to do this for the meantime.
Yes, Prime Minister. When starting with a salary cut, you should have started with the large amounts, which were with the ministers that practically win more than the teachers, doctors, and the list goes on. Salary cuts should have started with the billions of dollars that the ministers did and continue to do so. Salary cuts should have started by putting the responsible ones who put us in this mess. Let's start from the root of our nation's crisis. When Mr. Musa started giving billions of dollars, continuing with Mr. Barrow, who did the same thing. People are here suffering the consequences of these two persons who brought the crisis to our country. So, Prime Minister, let's start by holding them accountable for all these debts that now we Belizeans are paying the consequences for. Why are they not taken to court? As we all see news from Guatemala and the other countries in which they held any corrupt ministers responsible for any crisis that they caused to the nation. Why can't police hold the prime ministers that started all these crises responsible? It is time for us Belizeans to start taking actions on this type of things the prime ministers put us through. We, the people, deserve better.
If we start looking from the roots, then the list will never end. It's better to start from somewhere. And if we start with a salary reduction to save the nation, we should start from there. We cannot focus on them right now. We have to focus on those 10,000 Belizeans who are suffering without employment, without a salary. Those are the people that I need to focus on how to get them hired. The shutting down on the tourism causes a major impact on our unemployment rate. It is important that as Belizeans, we start doing sacrifices for our nation to save our country. Because if we don't start, we will regret the consequences that will follow later on the road. We will cause a far worse crisis in our nation that will be very hard to even get up from there. We don't want money devaluation. We don't want to experience what other nations experience when inflation causes major damages in their country. We have to think about what will be benefactory for our country so that we don't suffer any far worse. We don't want to have to suffer consequences. We don't need to face such consequences. If we can do something now, we should start now because it can get far worse than we can ever imagine. We don't want a country where our money has no value. How will we ever recover from that? So let's start thinking on our strategies to prevent that from happening. As the Prime Minister, it is my duty to see what is more beneficial to my country and to my people. And I think salary reduction is a way to start.
Thank you very much, Desiani and Indra, for that presentation. So we move to the second in the presentations. We have two more groups, volunteer.
Sir, I can read, Mr. for the present.
Yes. Okay, Minor, present your group.
So good evening, everyone. No, correction, good night. My group members is Delcy, Castellanos, and myself. And we chose option A. So the summary of our narrative. So we chose the ethnic group of the Maya. And Belize is a small country in Central America, known for its diverse ethnic groups, to which the Maya form part of. The Maya of today are a group of individuals that live in rural areas. They live simple lives, and many still do keep to their culture. However, where exactly does this ethnic group originate? In our Belizean studies class, we learned of their great history and stories, but at the same time, not only impacted us, but manifested the spirit of love for history. The Maya of the past were a race of great people who transcended the limitations brought upon them by nature, such as creating calendars, making progress in the field of astronomy, and developing a complex language system, to name some of their achievements. Their origin stems from the fact of being nomads, traveling large distances around tens of thousands of years in the past. In this search, they eventually settled upon this region of Central America, where over time the Maya civilization was born. As we discussed in our class, although having all this success, they could not be united, and this is something that we ought to learn from them. We got to experience their glory, but saw them crumble to the dust when they perished under the Spanish contact. The lesson provided by this of the need for unity in a nation is something that needs to be incorporated into our society and is a must for the betterment of our future. Moreover, to further highlight the importance of this narrative, it is without a doubt that it has provided a vital lesson of integrity and rectification. Integrity in the sense that we as a people need unity by avoiding the creation of prejudices between us. We need to rectify our mistakes and accept the essence that makes us all proud Belizeans. As we were privileged enough to learn about this ethnic group and its history, we saw that their culture and beliefs, although fading, has left a great impact in the formation of Belize. And as a citizen, this race, which laid the foundation of what we are now, who provide valuable lessons for life, is one which has changed the blind perspective of sight. I had and has shown us the true treasures we take for granted. Wait, where is the? Oh.
Thank you very much, Minor. Okay, we proceed with the next group, our last group. Can you begin?
Mr. Aula, good night, everyone. I will be acting as the Prime Minister, and Marcela will be acting as the union leader. And I would like to share a link with Justin so that he can present to you.
Yes, sir. I think I have the link already.
Greetings. Belize is now in a great need. I am working hard to solve all of greetings. Belize is now in a great need. I am working hard to solve all of Belize's problems. However, the solution takes time and process. On this week, I am working on adjustments to the recurring spending, restructuring our debts, and making a good governance. When the PUP left the office in 2008, the wages and pensions bill was at 262 million per year, and 12 years later, with the UDP, the bill was at 677 million per year. The government has been borrowing $1 million per day to pay salaries and pensions. Even also, the central bank has confirmed that after mid-April, salaries are paid, and the government will have insufficient funds and will need to borrow again to meet the end of April salaries. I am convinced that a salary adjustment is necessary to save 60 million in the new budget. Another 20 million is expected to be saved from the increment freeze. We will move towards balancing the budget by being fair and equitable to all. Yes, we are all called to sacrifice, even me myself. I am finding a solution to quickly solve the problem that the UDP left for me, you, and your generations. Thousands of our Belizeans are looking for work, having lost 100 or 50% of their salaries. Some have been out of work for an year. Because of the pandemic, Belize's economy was greatly impacted. To fight the pandemic, each Belizean should wear their mask, wash their hands, and get vaccinated when their time comes. To improve a good governance in Belize, it must be done carefully by a long-term strategy and process. With the government and citizens working together, we will have a good governance if we respect the rule of the law and the House committees. and build a strong partnership with you, the civil society. Thank you.
Antonio Sobranes fought hard so that the workers of his time and the labor unions received a better pay. Sadly, we no longer have him to be our voice against the oppressive forces that now want to undo his work. It is now our turn to stand for ourselves. Our voices must be heard as we fight for a better Belize, a different Belize, a Belize like the one Antonio Sobranes intended it to be. A Belize where workers and laborers are treated with respect and dignity, with a decent pay and good governance. Accepting the salary cut and the increment freeze takes us back over a century to the past, when workers busted their backs for 25 cents, and despite all their hard work. The industrial actions our teachers and the public service unions are taking is necessary because no worker should be paid any less, despite the pandemic, when the government officials get thousands of dollars in allowances that are, to be honest, unnecessary. To start with the brand new cars they got after the election, the free gas they receive, the free internet, free cable, free mobile data, the free rent allowances apart from their salaries. All this money should be going towards our broke economy. Not to mention the money they hustled with all the past scandals of the passports to foreigners, the selling of Belizean land to people who don't need it. More recently, hiring family members, which leaves income to only select families. Our economic struggles are all due to incompetent officials, and as Antonio Sobranes would say, due to top-heavy bureaucracy. Furthermore, this battle not only concerns the teachers or PSU workers, but also the future generations of this country, so that they may never work for a pay that is much lower than what they deserve. After years of study, our fight goes beyond us. It also seeks to create a better economy, a better treatment for future generations. Future teachers and public servants need a just pay, insurance benefits, and also increments. The money they are taking away from us deprives even the private sectors of income. Without the 10%, we will have no money for our taxi rides, as we would not want to spend what we can't afford. No money for haircuts, street vendors, or even restaurants. All these things become accessories, not necessities. These people need us to make a living, and a 10% not only affects us, the public sector, but the private sector as well. Lastly, it is not only about the money. Corruption in Belize has been the problem since before the pandemic, and it is time for it to end. And that is why we are advocating for the implementation of the UNCAC, so that we may live in the type of Belize Sobranes knew we could always be. The previously mentioned aggressions by our past ministers in their attempts to hustle extra money cannot go unpunished. The UNCAC seeks to make them pay for their blatant crimes. Our country has been plunged into corruption, and our people have stayed silent for far too long. The person responsible for the passport scandal, the person responsible for the land scandal, the person involved in the death of Pastor Lucas, the person responsible for the failed projects in Sanctuary Bay, all these people need to be held accountable, and their debt to this country must be paid. Justice must prevail. The UNCAC will make sure of this, that these crimes against our people never happen again, and that we get what we need in this country, something we haven't had in a long time: good governance. In conclusion, Sobranes started a movement that many of us took for granted for a long time. He fought for the people's money and for their fair treatment, but our cause goes beyond all that. We must unite and stand strong as one people. We must look past our political affiliations and fight for justice, fight for our future, fight for good governance.
Thank you very much to all the group participants. Um, um, for the sake of clarity, Mr. Giovanni and Justin, well, I wasn't aware that Minor and Delsey had changed topics. That's why we had grouped them under the same theme, because the discussion will focus on the unions, no? So it kind of leaves Delsey and Minor in an awkward situation. And in the assessment, it will be unfair to them because of
Mr.
lack of
Dave,
time. Uh-huh.
but
Yes.
I think if they are prepared enough, um, through the through this the question and answer session, we could tie in. I see an opportunity. I see an opportunity where a link can be made
Okay.
between the native cultural group that they presented with the ongoing situation.
Okay. Well. Okay. If that's the case, and as facilitator, you're able to do that, that is fine. I would like, therefore, for Minor to read again his presentation, because it caught me off guard. I was expecting Prime Minister Minor to give a speech, no, and he got me off guard. So I wasn't really focused because I was thinking, what am I going to do now? So I beg your indulgence in this case. Minor, continue.
Right now, Mr. Just can anybody hear me clear, or do I need to speak a little bit louder? So as I was saying, my group member is Delcy Castellanos and myself. So the ethnic group that we chose was the Maya, and here is the brief summary. So it would say Belize is a small country in Central America, known for its diverse ethnic groups to which the Maya form part of. The Maya of today are a group of individuals that live in rural areas. They live simple lives, and many still do keep to their culture. However, from where exactly does this ethnic group originate? In our religion studies class, we learn of their great history and stories, which at the same time not only impacted us, but manifested the spirit of love for history. The Maya of the past were a race of great people who transcended the limitations brought upon them by nature, such as creating calendars, making progress in the field of astronomy, and developing a complex language system, to name some of their achievements. Their origin stems from the fact of being nomads, traveling large distances around 10,000 years in the past. In this search, they eventually settled upon this region of Central America, where over time the Maya civilization was born. As we discussed in our class, although having all this success, they could not be united, and this is something that we ought to learn from them. We got to experience their glory, but saw them crumble to the dust when they perished under the Spanish contact. The lesson provided by this of the need for unity in a nation is something that needs to be incorporated in our society and is a must for the betterment of our future. Moreover, to further highlight the importance of this narrative, it is without a doubt that it has provided a vital lesson of integrity and rectification. Integrity in the sense that we as a people need unity by avoiding the creation of prejudices between us. We need to rectify our mistakes and accept the essence that makes us all proud Belizeans. As we were privileged enough to learn about this ethnic group, its history, we saw that their culture and beliefs, although fading, has left a great impact in the formation of Belize. As a citizen, this race which laid the foundation of what we are now, who provided valuable lessons for life, is one which has changed the blind perspective of sight I had and has shown us the true treasures we take for granted.
Thank you very much, Minor. Thank you to all groups who have presented. Now I am going to leave the floor to Mr. Giovanni to begin the conversation with our panelists. So the second portion of grading begins having you presented your work. We now move to the discussion part. Mr. Giovanni.
Hi, good night, everyone. Um, can you all hear me loud and clear?
Yes.
Usually when students are silent, it's because they agree with what the lecturer or the leader of the group is saying. But I have come to realize that a lot of times when students are silent is because they are afraid to speak out. I know that that is not the case with you tonight. So I do expect to hear you speak out. I intend to take a position of challenging you. So please do not misinterpret my words in the sense of when I critique your presentations. Um, what I see in the initial presentations, and you will have to convince me otherwise, is where you are kind of towing the line. You seem to be afraid to challenge the status quo. Um, and so I want to start off with the two groups who are presenting on the current situation vis-a-vis the Prime Minister of Belize versus the unions in 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 opposite ends at opposite ends of the drawing line regarding the salary cuts. And if history is a teacher, then here is an opportunity that you have to to point out some of these scenarios. And so I want to, how many of you were able to tie in what is ongoing with Rerum Novarum and what that document actually was about? How do you see the connection? I also want to challenge you to look at the preamble of the Belizean Constitution. Have any of you taken the time to look at that document? And in particular, to look at point B, the first few lines of point B, which speaks about the equitable distribution of economic resources. And again, when you consider that later on, within the same preamble of our constitution, there is the right, there is the, the opportunity that as Belizeans, we have the right to challenge the status quo. Any of you wants to shed some light on that, please?
Mr. Giovanni, can you repeat your question, please?
Okay, I was saying there are different aspects of history of the nationalist labor movement, of the nationalist political movement that you can draw parallels from in understanding the scenario today, particularly as regards the issue of the 10% cut. It is something that you are living through, or your parents might have been directly impacted. However, uh, historical evidence shows that over 140 years ago, something similar was ongoing. 100 years ago, that situation that pattern had repeated itself. So had it about 70 years ago. And so what I'm saying is, if you look at the preamble of the Belizean Constitution, and if you consider what Rerum Novarum had been bringing forward, how can you, what lessons are there that you can learn from and learn of in order to meet the challenges of today? I think I reworded it a little bit different, but maybe it's a little clearer as to what I'm leading to. Silence means consent, or it means fear. And don't be
Mr.
afraid of saying that you don't know.
Mr. Giovanni,
Yes, Winston.
I cannot answer your question because I am not I don't know about these laws that or the history, how the history of Belize, and I don't know to answer your question. I need to do some research, and I haven't done that research, but I just research about what the prime minister is saying in the present, not the history. So maybe other can answer your question, but I cannot answer your question without researching.
If you were in a court of law and I was the magistrate, I would tell you ignorance of the law is no excuse. Ignorance of historical facts that deal with what you're supposed to speak about tonight is no excuse. I'm challenging you. Please don't get me wrong.
I can try, but I think everything comes down to to all the union where.
Yeah, go ahead, Desiani. I think there was something, or somebody else has their mic on.
I think it's just me. But like I was saying, that everything comes down to to having unions where where they are fighting to have the rights to their labor laws in the workforce. And I think that throughout many years we have been experiencing that. So as like I was saying, throughout the years we have been noticing that, and today we're seeing the big impact of how the teachers are uniting with one another to fight for their rights, so that they are not so that the 10% is not being reduced for them. Because I think showing that you have a unity in a workforce bring then the whatsoever you're trying, the message you're trying to get across will at the end be satisfactory.
I would like to add to what Lisiani said. So firstly, Mr. Giovanni mentioned something about an equitable distribution of resources, I think it was. So as for that, I think personally, I think the ones who have more power will have more kind of like an access to all of these resources and also to these finances. So the ones with power will have more access to it, and the ones who are like poor will not really have that easily kind of access to that. So then it will be up to the labor unions, as Ziani said, to fight for their rights and for their better like living conditions to which the labor unions will be fighting for.
Um, are you saying that the labor conditions in Belize today are in dire situations? That the labor conditions in Belize today are just as bad or worse than they were in the time of Soberanis or in the time of Eve Jeffries?
I'm not
Yes,
saying I'm not saying it's worse because back in the time they didn't really have like that good of a pay for their hard work that they applied. But now like the pay is more, we can say, than the past times. So it isn't really that like like a worse situation compared to the past.
I think somebody else was going to say something.
The Siani?
I, d- I don't think it was bad like how Indra said, but as our generation and everything has been developing, I think the union is getting more stronger. So everyone will fight for what they think that they deserve. So I think what the unions are doing now, it's something that they want other unions to see us, so that they can fight for what they think that or what they feel like they deserve. So whatever happened at the past is what was is how Soberanis created the union is what is impacting now that we are seeing. It's not about that it was getting that it was worse. He was one who um kind of like created the union so that the unions on their own can start fighting for what they deserve.
What about individuals who belong to no union? Where does that put them? Are they left out uh, al imperio, as we say in Spanish? One of the things that you as students need to realize is that the the initial objective of Rerum Novarum was to challenge what was at the time being seen as a socialist movement throughout Europe. One way, a socialist movement which was being equated to communism in the modern sense of the definition. Yet the greatest book that you are most familiar with, mind you, there are other great books, but even the great book has the golden rule. You all are familiar with the golden rule. Love thy neighbor as you love thyself. So What I'm saying is there's a group out there fighting for 10%, fighting against a 10% salary cut. But what about those individuals who lost 100% of their income? How many of you have a relative or a friend who was directly impacted because when tourism came down, the big business owners in tourism, who are not Belizean, by the way, where do they keep their money? What did they do? It was left up to the past administration to feed the workers that were laid off. And in some cases, as you're all familiar with, and I'm not preaching party politics, please. I'm taking it from from a historian's point of view. But you're all familiar that even Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse were collecting food pantry. So where does that leave the equitable distribution of resources that the preamble of the Belizean Constitution speaks about in Resolution B, Chapter 4 of Belize's resolution? By the same token, I think you will agree with me, and I'm sorry, Mr. Dave, I think I might be taking a little time and I haven't been able to engage the other two students, but if we can bear with me. Um, do you believe all politicians and politricians, let's make a distinction there, because we do have politicians and we have politricians, should have a sound knowledge of economics. They should have a sound knowledge of what our Constitution says. And remember that the, the paragraphs in the preamble of our Constitution reflect rerum novarum. The work that Soberanis was doing, Soberanis did not only rely on his knowledge of what he experienced in Belize. Soberanis had been in various other places. He had been to New Orleans, he had worked in the Panama Canal. And so these concepts, these ideas that were being expressed outside of what is the small, and somebody used the word small country to describe Belize, these ideas that Soberanis he had brought from elsewhere. His knowledge and his experience had empowered him to challenge the status quo. 40 years earlier in 1892, 1894, Jamaicans who had been brought to Belize to work as policemen challenged the status quo when the colonial authorities were refusing to grant them a salary raise and instead devalued the currency in 1894. And it started with a riot in Orinjoak town that later on came to Belize City. And among them, there were women like Eve Jeffries, who was taken to court. And the people came out and they paid the fine for her. Today, we see things are different. The divide and conquer tactic continues to operate. And you as students of history, and in fact, you as the young people, as the generation that will move this country forward, need to go back and read, and not only read, but challenge what you read in order to truly understand the different perspectives of how history has played its role in our nation. I mentioned a short while ago, and specifically Minor and Delcy in your short presentation about the Maya. You speak about a small country. You speak about the Mayas being individuals. But your colleagues are speaking about unity. And when you look at the unions and who are fighting, who are those members? Are those individuals divided by ethnicity? I wouldn't say race, because there's only one race in this world, and that is the human race. But are they divided by ethnicity? Your description of the Maya as individuals who live simple lives, people who were able to pull through despite the limitations by nature. We need to start to challenge these concepts that are written. Limitations by nature, what does that tell you? That the Maya people cannot move forward? When you speak about Belize as a small country, you are already limiting yourselves. We have to think big. Belize is bigger than small. Yes, geographically, we're bigger than El Salvador. But with the potential that you as young people have, this country is not small. If you can maximize on your knowledge, on your potential, you can make this country greater. So don't think small. Don't see other people as small. And you need to stop saying about their culture. There are aspects of culture that you and I engage in that is a part and parcel of every other ethnic group in Belize. But but see, as you mentioned in your presentation, that they could not be united, that they perished under Spanish control. That is not true. That is what the books have. And question who wrote those books. Tell me that Finados does not have an element of Maya culture and tradition. Tell me that the participation of individuals in primicias in San Jose, San Pablo, in the Orinduac district, or in Chakchak, in Cristo Rey, or in Cananquin, in San Antonio and San Benito Poite, have roots elsewhere. I want to ask a question, though, of Minor and Delcy, because as I tried to defend your presentation earlier, how does the role, how does the life of the Maya bring in a level of, you mentioned self-sufficiency. Somebody mentioned it in one of their, when they were speaking. How does the Maya community, small as it may be, quote unquote, how does their role play out given the current scenario from March of 2020 to the present? That's a question. So I'd like an answer.
Mr. M, sorry, can you please reword the question?
You mentioned that the Maya live in their own communities, that they live simple lives. And I'm saying, okay, given that scenario of the Maya with all their limitations, living simple lives in their small communities across Belize, how does that compare? How does that play a role given the current scenario where a larger group of people, including some Maya brothers and sisters, joining the union and advocating, fighting for the 10% for the 10%, the proposed 10% salary cut not to be imposed. How does a small Maya community, what impact does it have? Or how can you see it? You do a general assessment of a small Maya community that is not involved in the ongoing struggle between the union and government.
Yes.
Mister, like in the days before, the Mayas use like corn or other things for their community, and nowadays they like the government or other parties, they just fight about the money, And in the Mayas, they only follow their cultures and do certain stuff for them, and didn't they only sacrifice like animals or people later on, but nowadays it seems totally different than the Mayas before.
Mister, yes, referring to the question that you asked, firstly, when I was mentioning as simple lives, I think it was not as meant as a literal statement as in, oh, they are bush people. What I meant was, and when you asked the question as in how can
Are,
they
are, are
play a
they are they
greater,
are they bush people?
no, because then if you look at an example of the lower Maya villages in Toledo, yes, people they are in small villages, sort of compared of how San Jose Socot would look like, and I mean they are in a sense moving forward in modernity, and we can see that in moving forward they also take part in these unions. They, although representing a small group, they want a better change, not only for themselves but for the people as a whole.
See, we're taking the Western view of what poverty is. The Maya are a rich people, you know. When Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse were receiving government packages, the Maya were continuing to plant their corn and beans and rice and pepper and true. What I'm leading you to look at is Soberanis was able to sustain for so long their protests and strikes, the demonstrations, the pickets, the boycotts against the large companies, against the employers, against the government. Because despite the fact that these companies, especially the BEC, owned most of the land, people in the out district continued to plant, they continued to practice subsistence agriculture, and they were self-sufficient. A 10 or a 50 or a 70% pay cut for those laborers back then would have meant nothing because they could feed themselves. Today, teachers are fighting for 10% against the government. What do they do at the end of the month when that cash comes in? Think about it. Is it really a large number of them spend it in things that are unnecessary? So when you look at the Maya in their simplicity as an example, considering Soberanis and the people who were supportive of them at the time, of Soberanis and the laborers and unemployed movement, and later on of the British Honduras Workers and Tradesmen Union, which would eventually emerge as the General Workers Union, whose leadership were knowledgeable, they were imbued with the principles that were being promoted by Rerum Novarum. They understood what they were fighting for. They understood that the government of those times was an agent of the oligarchy. They were an agent of the rich. They were an agent of, they were doing the bidding of those large landowners, of the wealthy class who sought to keep everybody else suppressed. And it wasn't only about the economics of it, but the race card was also used. The geographic location of people was used. And it is used even today against us. We are still called as the people living in the out district, yet we're a part of Belize. You know, so when you consider these things, and if you go back to understanding what the preamble of our constitution says, of what rerum novarum, the impact that it had on individuals, you as students have to be able to put into perspective what is going on today. Your presentations on what as prime ministers, think about it beyond just regurgitating what you hear and see on the media. How would you consider really? How would you have tackled this scenario? How would you, from a Maya community, whether you are for or against a 10% cut, how would you be able to contribute to the discussion, to the wider discussion? So these are some of the things that I believe that as a group, and remember, please, don't take the excuse that because you are never going to be a history major, that you don't need to know what's going on or what went on in the past. That is a critical element. The Maya who, whose culture you think is fading is not true. There is a renaissance among many of the Maya communities. My work over the last 8 years showed me how much people, because they know and understand their ethnocultural and historical background, have been able to pick up their pieces and they have stuck together. They have been united in moving this country forward, but they do it in their own communities. When you consider that the BDF, about 40% of the officers who serve in the Belize Defense Force are of Maya ethnicity. Imagine if those individuals were, imagine the potential they have to inflict a change in this country if they were to, if they were ever to go into a military coup. And you also have to consider that our next Governor General is herself of Maya origin. Coming back to the issue of the challenge between the government and the unions, it has become more of a money matter than actually ensuring that the mechanisms are in place to slash out corruption. After all, it is the very same people, it is the very same teachers, and I have been a teacher, but remember, I'm speaking from the point of view of a historian. It's the teachers themselves who have to begin to teach our students what our constitution says. We have to. There's no two ways about it. You see, the less you know, the better it is for those who know. And likewise, for members of the Public Service Union, it is them who control the documents. It is they who control the process of how monies pass from one desk to another for approval. It is them who have to be the whistleblowers when corruptive acts are taking place. Many of the same faces that you see out there were never whistleblowing when the past administration was carrying on with hanky-panky left, right, and center. It is the very same, it is those very same ones that I expect will be the ones to blow the whistle when they see the current members of this administration doing the same thing. And they shouldn't wait until it's late. So when you consider what has been going on, whether you do that from a cultural group perspectives, or you do that from the union group's perspective, or from those in authority perspective, bear in mind that you need to do the research. Yes, Winston, you need to do the research, and you need to do the research early. Don't wait until you're in front of the magistrate to tell them, I never read that page, because then you will be guilty, you will be found guilty as charged.
Yes, Marcella.
You are muted, Marcella. You have to unmute yourself, Marcella.
we have heard quite a bit from Mr. Giovanni. I would like to invite
Okay.
students I would like to invite students, the panelists, to speak out, to share what you think of all these um, all these thoughts and coming from Mr. Giovanni. Any of them.
So, um, to what Mr. Giovanni said, that teachers spend money on things that are unnecessary. So what I think is that the government officials also spend on things that are unnecessary, not only the teachers or the people who are fighting for against the 10%. And I think, in my opinion, I think that if the government started by cutting their salaries first, people would be more willing to give up that 10% cut. So it's not about what the teachers spend the money on or things. It's about what the government is doing. That's why the teachers don't want to accept the 10% cut.
Okay, anybody would like to build on what Marcela just said?
I agree with what Marcela said, since I think everyone, when a person gets their pay, they tend to spend on something which is unnecessary. And it will also go for the government, I might say. And so they should also start from reducing the salary from the government as they get to like have a large budget. So like it should start from them, and then the teachers will like follow that example from the government.
Anybody else?
I agree also with Marcela and what she said, due that we have to also look on other perspective that the teachers as well use their money for their school to prepare everything for their classes. So I think the salary reduction should have started with the ministers, due that they win more than any people, especially more than teachers, more than doctors, and so the list goes on. Their budget is way high, that I think, like, if they started by reducing with them first, I think the other unions would allow that to happen. But due that he never started there and he does not intend to even start from there, I think this is why this problem has arisen.
Let me throw in a question. Remember, I've been a teacher too, and I bought equipment that I needed in my class. Um, how much tax does a teacher pay? How much income tax? I'm talking income tax, not GST, because everybody in this country pays GST. From the person who earns a dollar a day to the one who earns so high, such as the ministers who don't pay tax, by the way. But how much the teachers and the general workers, the public servants, how much tax, income tax do they pay? Anybody
Mr.
knows?
Mr.
Yes.
It depends how much they are paid. For example,
I'm talking a percentage wise. It is 25%, people. It amounts to 25%. And then depending on, that's what you're deducted, at the end of a year. And then depending on where you fall on the salary scale, then the adjustments are made when you reclaim. All right, I want to point that out, because notice that none of the unions are speaking about reducing the income tax. Neither government nor the unions. So how equitable can the distribution of resources be if neither of the two giants, government and unions, if they're not talking real business? How much the doctors, how much the lawyers, how much the professionals pay income tax wise? Does any of you know? Lawyers, doctors, and these professionals pay only 6%. Yes, says single digit number, 6%. But that is not being discussed at the table. That is not being discussed at the table. And this is the reason I speak like this, because you expect that teachers and union leaders and government officials are going to set the cards on the table and really speak about the issues that are impacting us. You, the young people, need to research these things. You are going to be union leaders. You're going to be teachers union leaders. You're going to be public servants. You're going to be professional individuals. And you want the status quo to continue in the same way? The only way you're going to effect a positive change is when you know, is when you do the research. And when you have the facts with you. And remember, these things are historical. The patterns are there. When Soberanis blasted Governor Alan Burns and Harold Kittermaster was first, then Alan Burns. Yes, you go downtown San Ignacio and you love walking down Burns Avenue. You come to Benqueviejo del Carmen, and the first street immediately as you enter, or the second street, is Burns Street. You know? But you don't know where it came from. But it was against those type of peoples that Soberanis was arguing, against those who were in leadership of the Belize Estate Company, the largest land-owning company, the largest mahogany extraction company at the time. And that is why Soberanis also led the workers down in Dangriga at what is now Havana Bridge. The first bridge when you enter Dangriga and you're going towards the center of town. In 1935, workers who were on the Hummingbird Highway section, there was no Hummingbird Highway at the time, but who were working out from Middlesex, working on the railway line, on the trains, earning 25 cents a day. One of you mentioned about 25 cents a day. Yes, that's what was ongoing. And the big companies are making so much. But they had done their research. They knew what they were talking about. They felt the pinch. And so Soberanis was able to garner the people together. And there were other factors that the more we begin to research, we find out that so many of the linkages today in the things that are ongoing today, but nobody wants to speak about it. Teachers are satisfied. We teach. Yeah, you teach what? You teach people how to repeat things, or do you teach them how to learn those things and put it into their own perspectives and make value judgments, positive and negative? You see, history, his story, her story is like a coin. How many sides does a coin have? I see somebody has the last sign. All right, somebody says 2 sides. Marcela said a coin has 2 sides. You agree with Marcela? Does anyone have a different number? I see Winston saying 3. See, Winston is now challenging Marcela. Yes, three sides. Why, Winston?
The base, the volume, and the height. The base, the height, and the length.
We agree? So Marcela, you see, it has 3 sides. Yes, a coin has 3 sides. Your side, my side. you have to decide which of the two stories. That is what education is about. That is what history does. My challenging you to say, listen, you say about a small country, you speak about simple lives. We speak about limitations. But what does the other side of the story tell us? And so for me, it is important. Please, chapter 4 of the Belize Constitution, the preamble, especially preamble B. I'm not going to read it to you. I carry it in my cell. I have the Constitution here. But I want you to find it out yourself. And yeah, feel free to tell Mr. Dave what you found. Mr. Dave and I will converse at some point in time and he'll tell me, you know, X such and such a student found this. Because your ideas are important. Every
Mister,
single one of you. Yes.
Mister, about the constitution, Mister, and also I was trying to find a book about how to be a Belizean. Like if you, I cannot be really a free Belizean if I am being followed by the police. That's why I was following the laws, the laws of Belizean. But I think the police doesn't give it to anyone. So and the article that you gave me also, I was not able to find it, but I am willing to know about it. But it's like Belize is hiding all of these books. They don't want to give it. For example, I cannot be in certain areas that are prohibit where the police can come and just be checking or stopping me around. That's or for example, if I use a camera to record myself, the police is going to take my cell phone and then he can crash it and he can sell that it is against the law, but they don't want to give me that last to read it because I think they are hiding it or they don't want to give it to the public. And I don't know where I can found the article that you want us to read. If you like to share it, I will be happy to read it.
If the police are following you, you're very lucky. You have very good bodyguards. Remember, look at the other side of the coin, right? The Constitution is easy to find. Um, it's available online. Just look for Chapter 4, Constitution of Belize. It's available online. It's in a PDF format. You can download it, right? That is one answer I can readily give you. Where was I? Yeah, the preamble of the Constitution. See, Chapter 4 has 138 pages. It's in a PDF format, right? But it's not a lot to read. If you familiarize yourself with what your rights are, you say about recording, the police cannot record you. Go back and see what Chester Williams said just a few days ago, and you all know who Chester Williams is. And in the same way that they record you, you can record them. They are public servants. Ellos están en la mira también. But you have to know how to proceed with it. So these are some of the things that when you don't know, those who know take advantage of you. My final answer to you with regards to those things is a quotation that I love from reading a book that is entitled The Miseducation of the Negro. The Miseducation of the Negro. It is set in the United States about 100 years ago. And it is written by G. Carter Woodson. He said there are two types of education: that which is given to you and that which you give yourself. Two types of education: that which is given to you and that which you give yourself. I keep on reading. I keep on reading every single day. The number of books that we read, I'm sure Mr. David does the same thing. All of us, even if it's an article, all of us read day after day after day after day. I have my time when I go on Facebook, yes, just like you. I have my time when I go out and walk and do something else. But guaranteed, there's not one day that I can say, and I thank God for this, that I have not read at least 5 pages of something. Dicen que el que es analfabeta, le llaman analfabeta porque no sabe leer. ¿Sabes qué es lo peor? Saber leer y no hacerlo.
Okay, Mr. Giovanni, we need to wrap it up, and I need to ask a question to all the panelists. You know, having heard from Mr. Giovanni, the first thing he mentions, Rerum Novarum, we didn't have a chance to even mention, given the time constraints in the semester. But there is an article which just came out because we will be celebrating 130 years of Rerum Novarum in June somewhere, sometime. And the article mentions that even 130 years later, Rerum Novarum has a place in the world because most of what Pope Leo said, although working conditions have improved, they're still part of the economy, and they call it the gig economy, the workers that are not really on the a permanent post, like say a teacher or a civil servant, those who enter contracts on their own, you know, the freelance workers, for example, who are not under a permanent employment and go into a contract. What Rerum Novarum says, the open contracts that Pope Leo denounced, that you enter into a contract with an employer, and because you don't have unemployment, you take whatever the employer gives you. No, so that's still present in the economy more and more, in the world economy. My question to everybody is this, and I would like to call upon all of you one at a time. Given what Mr. Giovanni has said, and all these, the preamble to the Constitution, which was drafted 40 years ago, and Rerum Novarum 130 years ago, and we're still not there yet. And we have now the workers' unions in fight with the government of Belize for issues which practically seem to be the same issues like Soberanis's time. Things have changed, but they're more or less the same issues. And now that probably by the end of the month, the reality will set in when teachers, public servants, nurses, police get their paycheck and they find out that it's 10% less. I mean, that's a given. And that most likely the government will now institute the UNCAC and all these things that the unions are calling for, the Whistleblowers
Mr.
Act and
Dave,
all of that. Yes?
let me just interrupt you just for a little while. I know you're not asking my business, but let me tell you something, people. Last year, I went on a 50% salary cut. So when people out there are talking about 10%, they can't preach to me. I went on 50%. And here I am. I just needed to say that.
Okay. Okay, so my question is, things will happen, no? And we will move on. So, as a nation, we'll be celebrating 40 years of independence. We're not there yet. Maybe we're far from there, from the vision of George Price and the preamble of the Constitution and the dignity and equity. My question is this: you as Belizeans, tell me, what are the strengths we can draw from as Belize to move forward? Give me one strength that as Belizeans, we can draw from to move forward, regardless of what happens next week or next month or after with this pandemic.
Mr.
Who will start first?
Mr.
Marcela, go ahead.
I think that in order for Belize to move forward, we first have to have unity. If we are more united as people, Belize will be most likely to prosper.
I agree with Marcela, and also we had to have a good governance.
Mister,
This
Minor?
sorry, sorry, Marcela, I didn't mean to. That
If you
question I
want
would
to add, if
say,
sorry, Minor, if you want to add more to what you said,
no, I'm saying something different. Yeah.
no, I mean the Marcela and Delcy, feel free to go back. Yes,
Okay.
Minor?
I was gonna say that maybe a strength that we can rely on is trying to bring the right knowledge to students. In our society, we focus on trying to educate ourselves to get a job so that we can get paid, and then we focus more on money rather than the future that we might provide our country by trying to nurture students so that they think and they know the truth about what is going on.
Okay, that's a big thing.
I think a strength we could have is the communications between the ethnic groups or Belizeans as in general, because there's need to be like a set communications between all the Belizeans people in order for them to be fighting for their labor rights.
Good. Marcela, you seem to want to add something. Marcela? No?
Mr.
Okay. Yes, Desiani.
I was going to say that I agree also with Marcela that we do need unity. And like Indra said also that we need communication with our ethnic groups, and that will strengthen us as Belizean. But we have to also notice that as Belizeans, we have to learn how to use our knowledge, especially like talking about soberanis and all this 10% that's going on. There we as Belizean notice that there is corruption, but yet Belizeans intend to always go for that kind of governance. But I think that a little bit of knowledge and as Belizeans will make Belize a better place.
Okay, thank you. Winston?
Sir, I think we can build on more of education opportunities in Belize because we are limited because some of the education they just have education that are available like being a teacher, uh, like professor, just simple education that we can find in Belize. But I mean education like can improve Belize better. For example, more on health or invention on technologies. that we cannot find this education in Belize, but we have to find it outside of Belize. Like for example, if someone want to be a doctor, he has to go on Guatemala or Cuba to find it. We don't have it in Belize.
Mhm. Marcela, you seem to want to say something to add.
Yes, Mr. To add to all that, I think as strength we can hold ourselves in order to move forward is our history and our past and everything, so that we can learn from it and try to do better.
Good. Um, ho- Minor, you said that we need, and I guess this theme kind of surfaced in some contributions. Minor, you said that we need to educate others. Um, I mean, I can see that with teachers, but how, if you're not a teacher, how, Minor, how would you be able to do that? And likewise for all the others who said we need to unify. I mean, it's things that we say, but how can we put that into action in our own little way? I mean, you'll be moving out of school soon. How can you educate others? How can you promote national unity? How can you teach your Belizean history, etc., etc.?
Mister, I think in regards to that, I would start by trying to remove that lie that many of us students as we grow up are believing that there is no future for us in Belize, that we are supposed to go out and make something of ourselves in other developed nations, but
Okay,
try.
so you are refuting what Winston is denouncing, the lack of opportunities. So,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so
I because then I was thinking of how can we just leave and leave the country behind as it is. Why not encourage and share the knowledge of and remove that stigma that you can't be anything here in Belize.
but what if you want to be a doctor, as Winston says?
Yes, that is true, but then just because you study doesn't mean that you won't improve your country. Remember, first and foremost, yes, you have your vocation, but you also have your patriotism to your country.
Okay. Anybody wants to say anything to add to that?
Before you close, Mr. Dave, or whenever you finish with the students, but before you close, I will want to say.
Okay. Okay. Another thing, no. Let's say the prime minister, they table everything. They agree to make more accountable policies in the government. Um, do you think the point will come where a system will not be corrupt or won't lend itself to corruption? What do you think?
Can you repeat? Mr. I would say we
Go ahead, Marcela.
Mr. I would say that we should have hope that there will be a better Belize,
Okay.
because if we do not want to, if we do not have hope, then that's like mental poverty, like we were talking on our past classes, and mental poverty will lead Belize to never to prosper.
Desiani, what do you say?
Mister, I think we need like transparency with the government when governance. Like I think the people need to know the accountability of how or what the government is using the money for. Because once we know, I think Belize will become something better, and there will be more opportunities, especially right now that every year we have students getting graduating, and when they graduate, right now that's COVID times, to what they come, like there's no jobs, everyone is at home, it's hard for us to find a job, even though that we have a sixth firm, it still becomes something complicated to find a job. So I think having accountability of everything that the country is using the money to spend off, it will be a very nice way to start so that Belize can prosper.
Which means which means that money will be saved, and we can put the money for creating opportunities. No, yes. Who had their name? Winston, you had your hand up.
Mr. I think to end the corruption in Belize, we have to start with the government to sign the anti-corruption, because if we have a government who is scared to make a corruption, then he will try not to go to jail and make a good Belizean, good laws for.
Okay, I see your point, but do you think we need somebody from outside to tell us how corrupt our government is? Who in the end should be the check and balance, the checks on government? Who should check up on government? Marcela? Minor?
Us, the people, mister.
We the people should keep our government on check, no?
Mister.
And not, yes, Minor.
Yeah, I was just for in that regards. Yes, it should start with people, because then an example that I often see is that people complain about the corruption, but like when elections come and then they get paid, then they're not complaining, and like it's kind of like people, they know the issue, but they still want the issue there.
Because they're part of the corruption, no?
Yeah.
The interesting thing, if there were no pay cut, would the workers be rallying or bringing these issues to the forefront? No. So that's the question, and we talk about government in Belmopan, but you know, we the people should we always check only on government in Belmopan? Who else should we check on? I mean, we are ready to point fingers at the Prime Minister and government, but who else should we have on check as well? Yes, Feliciani?
I was going to say that also the ministers is not only the prime minister, but the ministers and the rest that follows after them, mister, because at the end of the day, they also take part on what's happening also with the money or and the corruption that's going on.
And who else? You said the ministers and the rest. Who rest? Which rest?
Like we have the ministers, and then we have the people. Because of the people also we have corruption, because like how Minor was saying that they take bribery. So if we put a stop to the ministers on how on bribing the people, then I think there's something much better for our future.
Mister.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add on the point that you were asking us, and would there was no salary cut with people we trying to bring these issues up, and I was in my response I was thinking no, because then if you are comfort, and why would people try to bring them up? Yeah, they live comfortable lives, so they're okay with what they have, and yeah, that is all. Yeah.
Very good point.
I think that we should also be checking on the police officers. as they also tend to be contributing to the corruption of the country and not only the government. So it's both of this as well.
And then how can teachers be corrupt? How can we teachers also be practicing corruption? Or public servants or nurses? So you see, my point is, as Mr. Giovanni's been saying, no, is that we need also to reflect on corruption and who is corrupt. So the first question is, how corrupt am I? Yes, Mr. Giovanni, final words, and then I will invite the rest, because we need to wrap it up, to say a final word.
Yeah, it is Mahatma Gandhi who said that if you want to see change in the world, it has to start with you. If we want to change this country, we have to start changing ourselves. You have all pointed out the flaws that exist, which means that you are aware, you are conscious of what's going on. But being conscious and consciously being are things that need to go together, right? Do you think to eat, or do you eat to think? Don't answer immediately. Do you eat to think, or do you think to eat? It does not have one answer, true? When you think about it. So my take is this. Remember that you have to take pride in yourself. You must take pride in your culture. For that to happen, you have to know your history. There are good and bad in your own family history. Winston, you were saying there are things that they want to hide from us. It even happens in our families. Some stories are not being told. So you have to find out. And you don't have to be happy with every story. But it doesn't mean that you have to do wrongs. It doesn't mean that you have to keep on blaming. Because if you want change, change begins with you, and you have to initiate it. On another point, in addition to reading Mr. David's books, I want to advise you to read 2 books, or actually 3, maybe 4. Among 4 of the books that I would recommend for you to better understand what we're doing is the book on the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx. After you read that, you then read Rerum Novarum. Or if you read Rerum Novarum, then you read Karl Marx, the Communist Manifesto. Because it deals with economics, it deals with industrialization, it deals with labor, it deals with people. I also want to recommend 2 other books that I have enjoyed from George Orwell. Animal Farm. Animal Farm. And after you read Animal Farm, please read 1984. 1984. I want you to remember that laws in Belize are punitive. Every jack single law, every Jenny law that we have in this country says that if you do X, Y, and Z in the negative form, you will be punished either by paying a fine or by being confined. Where are there laws that say that when you do something good, you should be rewarded? There's no law that says that for doing something good, you should be rewarded, you know. So it will take you and I to begin to change certain things in the system of law to also recognize that when people do good, they should be rewarded. You want to stop corruption? Rewards, merits, because you earn it. That should also be a part of it. In addition to laws saying that if you do wrong, you go to jail or you pay a fine. Mr. Dave asked, how can we improve the conditions in Belize? You mentioned unity, you mentioned good governance. And those are broad goals, but you know, it starts with us. Again, Gandhi, you have to be the change that you want to be. It begins with you. And then that means, therefore, that if you're going to be patriotic, or are you going to be a nationalist? Because patriotism and nationalism are two different things, you know. They are different. They sound the same, but they're different. Education. Somebody mentioned education. Remember, you are getting an academic education, but albeit that you have an associate's degree, do not be afraid to plant the land. Yes, ladies, you like your manicure? Guys, you want to keep your hands nice and soft? Don't be afraid to plant. Otherwise, the time will come when you will not even think to eat, or you will not eat to think. We should not be ashamed of tilling the soil, of getting our hands dirty, of taking a shovel and working with people in construction. Having a certificate, having a diploma, having a degree on the wall means nothing if you and I cannot communicate with people, especially with people who don't have one. We need to learn to interact and respect and give dignity to people who may not have the level of education, of academic education that you and I may have. Mentoring is very important. You want to see a new Belize, you begin change with yourself, and you have to be a role model for the younger generation. Likewise, self-sufficiency is critical. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid to go and learn a trade. Agriculture is critical. Health is critical. You can't enjoy your education if you're not healthy. You cannot enjoy going to sports if you're not healthy. And so agriculture is critical. And remember, food security. How were the Maya able to advance? How were ancient civilizations able to advance to the stage we are today? They were able to feed their people. If you have food on your table, good food, not junk food. If you have good food on your table, you can engage. Government having to be a role model, but it begins with each and every single individual. Because who is the government? I think that's the question that Mr. David was leading us to. At the end of the day, it's you and I. You have to also be creative. A lot of us, a lot of our young people spend time, I worry that the next generation of babies are going to grow up with some twitch in their fingers. Because most of the time, most people spend time with those gadgets, true? And your eyes are only going like this, in that. And you forget that you have a wider world. You have to have a vision. Games are good, but you have to be creative and innovative. Yes, it's good to have these high levels of technology, but if you can't use it, if you can't invent something with it, so innovation and invention, bring new ideas. That is what you have to do. It is your innovative ideas. It is your potential to invent something new that is going to give you an opportunity to invest in yourself, in your family, in your neighbors, in other people. You have to learn to uplift yourself. You start with yourself. The golden rule: love thy neighbor as you love thyself. Too many people love their neighbors, but they don't love themselves. It has to start with you. You have to like who you are. Don't worry about what the rest of the world says. If you're doing what is right, other people will follow you. You have to
Okay.
learn from the past. Do not be afraid to make mistakes. Be accountable to yourself. If you're accountable to yourself, you are accountable to others. Whoever goes into government, therefore, becomes accountable to themselves and to you and I together. If you are accountable to yourself, others will know it. And that's when you have all the right to speak up. As Minor said, some people don't say anything because what? Election time comes around, you get something, te compraron. That has to stop. Just these days I've been seeing some documents like those.
Okay.
So be
We have to,
accountable to
yeah,
yourself. And
we have to cut you
finally,
short. Yeah, okay.
yes,
Because
and
our
finally, yes, finally, be a big dreamer. Be a big dreamer for good things. There's a song that says, "Ain't nothing stopping us now." My parting shot.
thank you very much, Mr. Giovanni. Delcy, final words.
Thank you, Mr. Giovanni, for your wise words. It is very important. I also want to thank Mr. David and my classmates. Thank you for Minor for making our essay, and that's it.
Okay, Marcela.
Well, thank you for everyone who attended and was with us today.
Okay, Minor. Then Winston, then Desiani, then Indra.
Um, I would just like to I didn't really prepare anything to say, but I would just like to say thank you, Mr. Giovanni. Those words are very motivational, and I feel that those are things that our youth should be aware of, but we choose to follow the norms.
Winston.
Thank you, Mr. David, for giving a great class in all of the semester, and for all of the students who are work really hard together and help each other to pass the year. We expect to pass all. And also, Mr. Giovanni, for the lesson that you gave me and and showing me that I need to do more of be a more Belizean to know my laws. And thank you, Miss Gail, for being present and learning as well with us.
Thank you, Winston. Desiani.
Thank you, Mr. Giovanni, for attending today and for listening to all our presentations as well, and for the important message that you have given us across also. Mr. Justin, also thank you. Mr. David as well. We had a long journey. It was really interesting this semester to learn a little bit more about our history. And thanks everyone who has joined and for staying and watching our presentation and the conversation that has been brought.
Thank you, Indra.
Thank you to Mr. Giovanni who shared with us this information, which was very helpful. And thank you to Mr. Justin as well, and Mr. David Rees who helped us along the way. And also thank you to those who joined the meeting.
Thank you, Indra. And thank you to everybody, to Mr. Giovanni, who's been a very good supporter, excellent supporter of Belizean Studies program. To Justin and to all of you, the panelists and those who joined us this evening. And we invite you to connect tomorrow at the same time for our final forum. And remember, todo comienza aún, meaning the whole thing, the whole process of nation building for you begins now, begins today, no? You're moving out and it's time to recapitulate, to go backwards and draw on all that energy, all that, those efforts, all that a power that has been given through all these narratives, and begin the story anew in its new chapter as we continue this whole process of homeland, which is precisely that, a responsibility that we have, that we've inherited, and we trust that you will do a better job than our generations have done, that our generation, the past generations, that you do so with renewed energy and in unity, as we have said. Thank you very much. Have a very good evening. Mr. Pinello and Justin, you can send me your grading sheet with the points, and then we do an average. So good night, and Justin will say goodbye with our theme song.
Shut up for we Belize. Shut up for we Belize. Shut up for we Belize. Belize se vencerá. Shut up for we Belize. Shut up for we Belize. Shut up for we Belize. Belize se vencerá. De San Ignacio a Belice, de Punta Gorda hasta el Belmopán. De San Ignacio a Belice, de Punta Gorda hasta el Belmopán. Independencia es el grito del 20.